Project Phobos Educational Briefing.
On behalf of the Project Phobos team, we would like to introduce Dr. David Perlman, the Project Phobos Principal Investigator. In this first Project Phobos educational briefing, Dr. Perlman will provide an introduction to the topic of distinguishing public health research from public health practice.
A brief history of research ethics.
Why study the history of research ethics?
There are a multitude of reasons why we study the history of research ethics. I'd like to start off with a quote from philosopher George Santayana. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. There's another reason. Discussion of ethical principles and regulations, abstracted from the historical context in which they were developed and refined, does an injustice to people who are harmed in research and from which harms our system of protections have evolved into their current form.
Trial of Nazi physicians and the Nuremberg Code, 1947.
The judges at the trials, held in Nuremberg, developed 10 ethical principles to judge the Nazi physicians.
Declaration of Helsinki, 1964 to 2000.
Adopted by the World Medical Association in 1964 and revised in 1975, 1983, 1989, 1996, and 2000.
Unlike the Nuremberg Code, the Declaration is an ever-evolving document that attempts to take into account the evolving nature of scientific research and changing culture and socioeconomic considerations. Henry Beecher's Exposé of Unethical Research, 1966.
Henry Beecher, a Harvard anesthesiologist, published an exposé of 18 unethical experiments published in prominent medical journals in 1966. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, 1932 to 1972.
In 1972, the New York Times published articles exposing ethical atrocities associated with a public health service study on the natural progression of syphilis in poor and largely uneducated African American men in rural Tuskegee, Alabama. National Commission, 1974.
Such revelations spurred Senate hearings in 1974, the result of which was the National Research Act, which authorized the formation of the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research.
The commission was charged with developing the philosophical and practical ethical elements that should govern scientific research where human beings were the test subjects. The commission articulated 3 core ethical principles in its famous Belmont Report. Each of these principles is translated into particular ethical practices in the FDA and DHHS regulations, as well as the International Conference on Harmonization, Good Clinical Practice Guidelines, which are international standards for clinical trials.
The 3 principles articulated in the Belmont Report are respect for persons, beneficence, and justice.
Respect for persons.
The principle of respect for persons is translated into the requirements to get informed consent and to make sure that subjects who consent to research actually have the capacity to do so. Beneficence.
The principle of beneficence is translated into maximizing benefits while minimizing harms. Justice.
The principle of justice is translated into equitable subject selection and the equitable distribution of benefits of research.
Two central regulatory protections are codified at Title 45, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 46, Subparts A through D, for the Department of Health and Human Services.
Ethical research review rests on 2 central regulatory protections.
The first protection is informed consent. The second is IRB review. Public health is different.
The problem.
The regulations for the protection of human subjects define research in terms of several key concepts: intent, systematic investigation, and generalizability. At departments of health, this definition can prove vexing for determining when activities are research or public health practice.
Is it public health research or practice?
Two guidance documents are seen as authoritative: the Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists and the Center for Disease Control Guidelines.
The CSTE report parses out distinguishing public health research from public health practice in terms of the following considerations: the general legal authority, the specific intent of the project, the responsibilities of both the agency and the investigators, what benefits there are to participants, whether or not the project contains an element of experimentation, and how the study subjects will be selected. To help in making the distinction between public health research and public health practice, we've prepared a small chart and included a screenshot of that chart here that shows how to make the determination. We'll pause a few minutes and let you read the chart.
CDC Guidelines.
Unlike the CSTE report, the CDC Guidelines has the following progression of its argument. Research is defined as, quote, a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. That's taken straight from the common rule. The key word here is designed. And according to the CDC guidance, the major difference between research and non-research lies in the primary intent of the activity. Therefore, the intentionality of the investigator proposing an activity becomes paramount according to the CDC guidelines.
The upshot and fallout.
CDC locates distinction on specific intent of the activity and therefore on intentionality of the investigator. Investigators can game the system to avoid IRB review and additional protections for subjects. The CSTE report provides a more nuanced set of considerations to guide decision-making.
Why is the distinction important? Depending on whether a public health activity is deemed practice or research, a variety of federal and state laws and regulations for the protection of human subjects and their identifiable private information will apply. Regardless of the determination, public health officials are legally and ethically required to protect the interests of individuals, but the primary focus is on the health of populations. For instance, some things should just not go to the IRB, whereas others should. We've taken a couple of quotes from the CSTE report, and they are as follows.
Public health practice activities that are misclassified as research require public health authorities to engage in time-consuming reviews through governmental or private sector IRBs. In some cases, the mere assessment by an IRB, even when expedited, may thwart an activity to the detriment of the public's health. In other cases, the IRB may require additional protections for persons viewed as human research subjects that defeat public health objectives in principle or design, or for lack of funding.
Conversely, public health research that is misclassified as practice may allow governmental health authorities to collect and analyze sensitive human data in possible violation of health information privacy interests, or interact with human subjects without complete adherence to research protections to the detriment of individual participants.
Both of these quotes reveal an ethical tension in public health ethics. Traditional research ethics is concerned with protection of individual subjects from harm or unnecessary risks, whereas public health is more concerned with protecting populations from harm or unnecessary risks through health prevention measures and research. I've published an article in 2008 that discusses these issues in more detail. The complete citation is
Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness, 2008, Issue 2, pages 185 to 191.
We'll make this article available on the Project Phobos website. If you have thoughts or questions about Project Phobos or this podcast, please contact me, Dr. David Perlman, at the phone number and email provided on their screen.